bride humiliated poor little girl at her wedding, unaware she is her billionaire husband lost daughter. On the day of her perfect $1 million wedding, Charlotte Westbrook humiliated a poor young cleaner in front of everyone, mocking her clothes, her status, even her existence. But what Charlotte didn't know was that the girl she shamed, the girl she called trash, was the one secret her future husband's family had buried for 23 years. A lost daughter, a forgotten heir, a storm-born miracle who survived death itself, and was now standing inside the mansion that should have been her home. By sundown, the wedding would turn into a nightmare. A mother would recognize the child she thought she lost forever. A billionaire would face the truth he'd tried to destroy. And the bride would learn that the girl she humiliated was about to reclaim everything she was denied, including the Harrison name. Before we begin, please, kindly subscribe to this channel, like, comment and share. I'll be so happy if this story touches hearts all over the world. The rain fell in sheets that November night 23 years ago, drumming against the windows of the Harrison mansion like desperate fingers seeking entry. Victoria Harrison clutched her newborn daughter to her chest, her heart fracturing into 1,000 irreparable pieces as she made the most devastating decision of her life. "Please," she whispered to the woman standing in the shadows of her bedroom, a woman whose face she could barely see through her tears. "Please take care of her. Tell her that her mother loved her more than life itself." The woman, a nurse from the hospital where Victoria had given birth just 3 days earlier, nodded solemnly, taking the tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket embroidered with silver threads. The baby's name, Lily, had been stitched into the corner by Victoria's own trembling hands during the long, lonely months of her pregnancy. "Mrs. Harrison, are you absolutely certain?" the nurse asked, her voice thick with concern. "Once I leave here, there's no going back. Your husband will never know she existed." Victoria's hand shook as she pressed a sealed envelope into the nurse's palm alongside her daughter. Inside was a letter she'd written in the dark hours of the morning, explaining everything: her love, her desperation, her unbearable circumstances. She'd also tucked in a delicate gold locket containing a photograph of herself as a young woman, and a substantial check that represented every penny she'd secretly saved over the years. "I'm certain," Victoria said, though her voice cracked on the word. "Richard can never know. He would destroy her, just as he's destroying me. Please, give her a chance at a life filled with love, even if I cannot be the one to give it to her." The nurse's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she cradled the sleeping infant. "I promise you, I'll find her the best home possible. A family who will cherish her." As the woman slipped through the servant's entrance and disappeared into the stormy night, Victoria collapsed onto her bed, burying her face in the pillow that still carried her daughter's sweet, innocent scent. She sobbed until her throat was raw and her eyes burned, knowing that she would carry this secret, and this unbearable grief, for the rest of her days. What Victoria didn't know was that tragedy would strike that very night. The nurse, driving through the treacherous storm with baby Lily secured in the backseat, would lose control on a rain-slick bridge. The car would plunge into the swollen river below. The nurse would perish, but miraculously, the baby would be found hours later by a homeless woman named Martha Green, who discovered the infant still strapped in her car seat, washed up on the riverbank, crying but alive. Martha, who had lost everything to addiction and bad choices, saw in that baby's survival a sign from God. The envelope with Victoria's letter and check had been swept away by the current, lost forever. All that remained was the pink blanket and the gold locket, which Martha would keep safe for the child she would raise as her own. Lily Green stood before the cracked mirror in the tiny bathroom of the women's shelter, trying to make herself presentable for another day of job hunting. At 23, she possessed a striking beauty that no amount of poverty could diminish. Her mother's high cheekbones, her delicate features, and eyes the color of storm clouds that seemed to hold depths of wisdom beyond her years. But Lily's life had been anything but easy. Martha had done her best, staying sober for nearly 10 years while raising Lily with all the love in her damaged heart. She'd told Lily the story of how she'd found her, a miracle baby, a second chance for both of them. They'd lived in shelters, budget motels, and occasionally in Martha's friends' apartments, but they'd had each other, and that had been enough. Then Martha got sick. Cancer, the doctors said, too advanced to treat. Lily had been just 17 when Martha passed away, leaving her alone in the world with nothing but that pink blanket, the mysterious gold locket, and a fierce determination to make something of herself despite the odds. Now, 6 years later, Lily had put herself through community college while working 3 jobs. She'd earned her associate degree in fine arts with honors, and she dreamed of becoming a professional artist. Her paintings, vibrant, emotional pieces that seemed to capture the human soul, had caught the attention of a few small galleries, but she still struggled to make ends meet. She worked mornings at a coffee shop, afternoons cleaning houses for a service that catered to the wealthy, and evenings waitressing at an upscale restaurant where she served people who spent more on a single meal than she earned in a week. She lived in the shelter when her meager savings ran out, which happened more often than she'd like to admit. Today, she had a morning shift at the coffee shop, followed by an afternoon cleaning appointment at one of the city's most exclusive estates. As she braided her long, dark hair and slipped on her worn sneakers, Lily touched the locket that hung around her neck, her only connection to a past she would never understand. "Mom," she whispered to Martha's memory, "I wish you were here. I wish you could tell me where I really came from." She grabbed her backpack, stuffed with her work uniforms and art supplies. She always carried a sketchbook, capturing life's moments whenever she had a spare second, and headed out into the crisp October morning. Across the city, in a penthouse office overlooking the glittering skyline, Richard Harrison sat behind his massive mahogany desk, reviewing contracts with his steel-grey eyes. At 65, he remained a formidable presence in the business world, ruthless, brilliant, and utterly without mercy for those who crossed him. The Harrison empire stretched across real estate, technology, and pharmaceuticals. Richard had built it from his father's modest construction company into a multinational corporation worth billions. He demanded perfection, expected absolute loyalty, and crushed anyone who threatened his carefully constructed world. His wife Victoria sat in the conservatory of their mansion, 3 miles from his office, surrounded by her beloved orchids. At 62, she remained beautiful in a fragile, ethereal way, though shadows haunted her eyes, shadows that had been there for 23 years. She'd stayed with Richard all these years, playing the role of the perfect society wife, attending galas and charity functions, smiling for cameras. But inside, she was hollow. She'd given away her only child to save her from Richard's cruelty, and not a single day passed that she didn't wonder where her daughter was, whether she was happy, whether she ever thought about the mother who'd abandoned her. Richard had never wanted children. He'd made that clear from the beginning of their marriage, but Victoria had been young and naive, believing she could change his mind. When she'd discovered she was pregnant, she'd been terrified to tell him. She'd hidden it for as long as possible, wearing loose clothing and avoiding him. But Richard had discovered the truth in her 7th month. His rage had been volcanic. He told her in no uncertain terms that she would terminate the pregnancy or he would divorce her, leaving her penniless. Her family had lost everything in bad investments, and she had no resources of her own. When she'd refused, he'd threatened worse. He'd said he would make sure the child suffered every day of its life, that he would break it the way he broke everyone who defied him. Victoria had believed him. She'd seen his cruelty firsthand. So she'd pretended to miscarry, and 3 weeks later, she'd given birth in secret and made the impossible choice to give her daughter away. Now, as she misted her orchids with trembling hands, Victoria wondered, for the 1000th time, whether she'd made the right decision. Whether her daughter had found the love and happiness Victoria had hoped for. Whether she would ever, somehow, see her again. Richard and Victoria's world was about to intersect with Lily's in ways none of them could imagine, all because of Victoria's nephew, Alexander Harrison. Alexander was the son of Richard's younger brother, who had died in a plane crash 15 years earlier. Richard had taken Alexander in, molding him to eventually take over the Harrison empire. At 35, Alexander was everything Richard wanted in a successor: ambitious, intelligent, charismatic, and willing to make the hard decisions that business required. He was also recently engaged to Charlotte Westbrook, the daughter of one of Richard's business partners. Charlotte was 28, beautiful in a polished, practiced way, with honey blonde hair, designer clothes, and the kind of confidence that came from never having known a moment of real hardship. The wedding was planned for the last Saturday in October, just 3 weeks away. It would be the social event of the season, 500 guests, the city's finest cathedral, a reception at the Harrison estate that would cost more than most people earned in a decade. Charlotte had been planning every detail for the past year with the intensity of a military campaign. Everything had to be perfect: the flowers, the music, the menu, the guest list. She'd hired the most sought-after wedding planner in the state and spent hours each day micromanaging every aspect. What Charlotte didn't know was that Alexander's heart wasn't entirely in the marriage. He liked Charlotte well enough. She was attractive, socially adept, and understood the world he lived in. But he didn't love her, not the way he'd always imagined he might love someone. Still, it was a good match. Their families approved. It made business sense. And Alexander had long ago learned to prioritize practicality over passion. Victoria, watching her nephew prepare for his wedding, felt a deep sadness. She saw in Alexander a young man who had learned to bury his emotions, just as she had. She wished better for him, but she had no power to change anything. She never had. Lily reported to the cleaning services office on a Thursday morning, expecting her usual roster of appointments. Instead, her supervisor, Mrs. Chen, handed her a special assignment. "Lily, I'm putting you on a big job tomorrow," Mrs. Chen said, her expression serious. "It's for the Harrison estate. They're having a wedding there in 3 weeks, and they want a deep clean of the entire mansion before the planning intensifies. It's a 2-week job, 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. The pay is double your usual rate, and if you do well, it could lead to more high-end assignments." Lily's heart leapt. Double pay for 2 weeks would change everything. She could move out of the shelter, maybe get a small apartment. She could buy proper art supplies instead of the cheap ones she'd been making do with. She could breathe, just a little bit. "I'll do my best work," Lily promised, and Mrs. Chen smiled. "I know you will. That's why I'm sending you. The Harrisons are particular. They expect excellence. But you're my most thorough, most careful worker. Just remember, be invisible, be efficient, and don't touch anything you're not specifically told to clean." The next morning, Lily arrived at the Harrison estate at 7 a.m. sharp. She stood outside the iron gates, staring up at the mansion beyond, and felt her breath catch. It looked like something from a fairy tale, a massive Victorian structure with turrets and balconies, surrounded by manicured gardens that seemed to stretch on forever. A security guard checked her identification and waved her through. As she walked up the long driveway, pulling her cart of cleaning supplies, Lily felt like she'd stepped into another world. This was how the other half lived, the half that would never understand what it was like to skip meals to afford art supplies, or to sleep in a shelter because the rent was due. She was met at the servants' entrance by the head housekeeper, Mrs. Blackwood, a stern woman in her 60s with iron-grey hair pulled back in a tight bun. "You must be Miss Green," Mrs. Blackwood said, looking Lily up and down with a critical eye. "Mrs. Chen speaks highly of your work. Let me be clear about the expectations here. The Harrison family values privacy and perfection. You will clean thoroughly but quickly. You will not disturb any personal items. You will not speak to family members unless directly addressed. And you will absolutely not gossip about anything you see or hear in this house. Is that understood?" "Yes, Lily said softly. "Good. Follow me." Mrs. Blackwood led Lily through the service corridors of the mansion, explaining the layout and the cleaning schedule. The house was enormous, 30 rooms, not counting the ballroom, conservatory, and library. Each room was decorated with more wealth than Lily had seen in her entire life. Priceless artwork hung on the walls, antiques filled every corner, and crystal chandeliers sparkled from the ceilings. But despite its grandeur, there was something cold about the house. It felt more like a museum than a home, beautiful but lifeless, as if no one really lived here so much as existed in it. "You'll start with the guest wing on the 3rd floor," Mrs. Blackwood instructed. "Work your way down. The family is rarely home during the day. Mr. Harrison is at his office. Mrs. Harrison is usually in the conservatory or at one of her charity functions, and Mr. Alexander keeps his own hours. Miss Westbrook, his fiancée, is here frequently, overseeing wedding preparations. If you encounter her, be polite and stay out of her way." Lily nodded, absorbing every word. She spent the morning working through the guest rooms, scrubbing floors, dusting furniture, polishing windows until they gleamed. She took pride in her work, finding a meditative quality in the repetitive tasks. Around noon, while she was cleaning a bathroom in the East Wing, she heard voices drifting through an open window. She glanced out and saw a woman standing in the garden below. Mrs. Harrison, she assumed, based on Mrs. Blackwood's description. The woman was tending to flowers, moving among them with a tenderness that seemed at odds with the sterile formality of the house. There was something about her that caught Lily's attention. Even from a distance, Lily could see the sadness in the way she moved, as if she carried an unbearable weight. It reminded Lily of how Martha had looked in those last months before the cancer took her, like someone who was haunted by ghosts only she could see. Lily turned back to her work, pushing the thought away. It wasn't her place to wonder about the lives of the wealthy. She had enough troubles of her own. On her 3rd day at the Harrison mansion, Lily's carefully maintained invisibility was shattered. She was cleaning the main staircase, polishing the ornate banister, when she heard footsteps and laughter echoing from the entrance hall below. A woman's voice rang out, sharp and imperious. "And I told the florist that if they couldn't guarantee the exact shade of ivory I specified, I would take my business elsewhere. This wedding will be perfect or heads will roll." Lily glanced down and saw Charlotte Westbrook standing in the foyer, surrounded by several women who were nodding and murmuring agreement. Charlotte was stunning in a way that seemed almost artificial, her makeup flawless, her hair perfectly styled, her designer dress showing off her slender figure. Lily tried to make herself small, to blend into the woodwork, but her cart of cleaning supplies was conspicuously positioned at the top of the stairs. Charlotte's gaze swept upward and landed on her, and her expression shifted from mild annoyance to something harder. "Excuse me," Charlotte called up, her voice dripping with disdain. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" Lily's heart sank. "I'm with the cleaning service. Mrs. Blackwood assigned me to." "I don't care who assigned you," Charlotte interrupted, her voice cutting. "You're in my way. Can't you see we are trying to tour the house for wedding planning? How am I supposed to visualize the decor with a maid and her cart cluttering up the space?" One of Charlotte's friends giggled, and Lily felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. "I apologize," Lily said quietly, beginning to gather her supplies. "I'll move to another area." "See that you do," Charlotte said dismissively, turning back to her friends. "And try to be less obtrusive. It's bad enough that this house needs an army of staff to maintain it. The least they can do is stay out of sight." Lily hurried away, her hands trembling as she pushed her cart down the hallway. She'd encountered plenty of rude people in her various jobs, but something about Charlotte's casual cruelty stung more than usual. Maybe it was the laughter of her friends, or the way she'd looked at Lily as if she was nothing, less than nothing. As Lily worked in a guest room far from where Charlotte and her entourage were touring, she tried to push the encounter from her mind. She needed this job. She couldn't afford to let her pride get in the way. But that night, lying in her narrow bed at the shelter, Lily sketched Charlotte's face in her notebook. She captured the beauty and the cruelty, the perfection and the coldness. It was a therapeutic exercise, transforming her anger into art. She didn't know then that this sketch would become important in ways she couldn't imagine. Victoria had witnessed the entire encounter from the conservatory, which overlooked the entrance hall through a large glass wall. She'd been arranging flowers when Charlotte and her friends had arrived, and she'd watched as her future niece-in-law had humiliated the young cleaning woman on the stairs. Something about the girl had caught Victoria's attention. It wasn't just the casual cruelty of Charlotte's treatment, though that had disturbed her deeply. It was something about the girl herself. The way she held herself with quiet dignity even as she was being insulted. The delicate features of her face. The dark hair that fell around her shoulders in soft waves. Victoria found herself unable to look away. There was something familiar about the girl, something that tugged at a place deep in Victoria's heart that had been numb for 23 years. She watched as the girl hurried away with her cleaning cart, her shoulders straight despite the humiliation. And Victoria felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness for this stranger, this young woman who was being treated as invisible by people who should know better. That evening, Victoria asked Mrs. Blackwood about the new cleaning girl. Her name is Lily Green, Mrs. Blackwood reported. She's from the service we use for special projects. Mrs. Chen says she's one of their best workers, thorough, responsible, and trustworthy. She's here for a 2-week deep cleaning project in preparation for the wedding. Lily, Victoria repeated softly, and something inside her chest tightened painfully. It was a common name, a coincidence, nothing more. And yet, is something wrong, Mrs. Blackwood asked, noticing Victoria's expression. No, Victoria said quickly. I happened to observe Miss Westbrook speaking rather harshly to the girl today. I wanted to ensure she wasn't distressed. Mrs. Blackwood's expression tightened. Miss Westbrook has been quite demanding with the staff during the wedding preparations. I'll make sure the girl understands that she's doing good work and is appreciated. Thank you, Victoria said. And Mrs. Blackwood? Please ensure that Miss Green is treated with respect. I won't have anyone bullied in my home. Of course, After Mrs. Blackwood left, Victoria stood alone in the conservatory, her heart racing with an emotion she couldn't name. She tried to tell herself she was being foolish, that her maternal instincts were playing tricks on her after all these years. But she couldn't shake the feeling that this girl, this Lily, was important somehow. That night, Victoria went to the locked drawer in her private sitting room where she kept her most precious possessions. Hidden beneath layers of scarves and handkerchiefs was a small photograph, the only picture she had of her daughter. It had been taken in the hospital, just hours after birth, before Victoria had made her terrible decision. She stared at the tiny face in the photograph, trying to imagine what her daughter might look like now, at 23. Would she have Victoria's eyes? Her delicate features? Would she be kind and gentle, or would the hardness of life have shaped her into someone different? Victoria pressed the photograph to her chest and wept silently, as she had wept so many nights before. She didn't know why, but she felt certain that something was about to change, that the carefully constructed walls around her secret were beginning to crumble. Over the following days, Lily found herself drawn to work in the areas near the conservatory. She told herself it was because those rooms were particularly elegant and needed careful attention, but the truth was more complex. She'd catch glimpses of Mrs. Harrison through the glass walls, tending to her flowers with such gentle devotion, and Lily felt an inexplicable pull toward the older woman. There was something about Victoria Harrison that reminded Lily of Martha in those last, precious months. The same sadness, yes, but also a kind of enduring grace. A quiet strength that came from having survived unbearable things. On the 6th day of her assignment, Lily was cleaning the hallway adjacent to the conservatory when she heard a soft crash, followed by a muffled cry. She hesitated. Mrs. Blackwood's warnings about staying invisible echoed in her mind, but her instinct to help overrode her caution. She pushed open the conservatory door and found Victoria on the floor, surrounded by broken pottery and scattered soil. An orchid lay beside her, its delicate petals crushed. Mrs. Harrison. Lily dropped her cleaning cloth and rushed forward. Are you hurt? Victoria looked up, her face pale, one hand pressed her chest. I just felt faint for a moment. I'm fine, really. But she wasn't fine. Lily could see that clearly. Victoria's breathing was shallow, and her hands were trembling. Without thinking, Lily slipped her arm around the older woman's shoulders. Let me help you to a chair, Lily said gently. Take slow, deep breaths. She guided Victoria to a nearby bench, supporting her weight carefully. Victoria sank onto the cushions, still taking those shallow, rapid breaths. Lily knelt before her, her training from her brief stint as a home health aide kicking in. "Mrs. Harrison, I think you might be having a panic attack," Lily said softly. "Can you try to breathe with me? In through your nose, hold for 4 counts, out through your mouth." Victoria nodded, and Lily began to demonstrate, breathing slowly and deliberately. After a few moments, Victoria's breathing began to synchronize with hers, slowing and deepening. Color started to return to her cheeks. "That's it," Lily encouraged. "You're doing great. Just keep breathing." They sat like that for several minutes, breathing together in the sun-drenched conservatory, surrounded by the fragrance of flowers. Gradually, Victoria's panic subsided. "Thank you," Victoria whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. "I don't know what came over me." "You don't have to explain," Lily said. "Sometimes our bodies just react to things we are carrying inside." Victoria studied Lily's face with an intensity that made Lily slightly uncomfortable. "You are very kind," Victoria said. "And very wise for someone so young. What's your name?" "Lily," she answered. "Lily Green." Something flickered in Victoria's expression, a flash of pain so intense that Lily almost asked if she needed to call for help. But then Victoria composed herself, her social mask sliding back into place. "Lily," Victoria repeated, as if tasting the name. "That's a beautiful name." "Thank you. The woman who raised me named me. She said she found me during a storm, and when the sun came out the next morning, the first flowers she saw were lilies growing wild by the river." Victoria's breath caught audibly. "She found you?" Lily hesitated. She rarely told people her story. It invited too many questions, too much pity. But something about this woman made her want to share. "I'm adopted," Lily said simply. "My mother, Martha, the woman who raised me, she found me when I was just a few days old. She never knew who my birth parents were. She kept me safe, loved me, until she passed away 6 years ago." Victoria's hand moved to her throat, and Lily saw that she was wearing a delicate gold chain. "I'm so sorry for your loss," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. "She must have been a remarkable woman to raise such a compassionate daughter." "She was everything to me," Lily said, and felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever she thought about Martha. "I miss her every day." "I'm sure she's proud of you," Victoria said softly. Then, after a pause, "Do you ever wonder about your birth parents? Whether they think of you?" The question was asked so carefully, with such gentle concern, that Lily found herself answering honestly. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Mostly I wonder if they are alive. If they ever regretted giving me up. If they loved me at all, or if I was just unwanted." "Oh, my dear," Victoria said, and suddenly she was gripping Lily's hands tightly. "I'm certain they loved you. I'm certain that giving you up was the hardest thing they ever did, and that they've thought of you every single day since." The conviction in Victoria's voice startled Lily. She looked into the older woman's eyes and saw tears streaming down her face, saw a grief so profound that it seemed to encompass everything. "Mrs. Harrison," Lily said uncertainly, "are you sure you're all right?" Victoria released Lily's hands and quickly wiped her tears. "I apologize. I'm just emotional today. But thank you, Lily. Thank you for your kindness. You've helped me more than you know." Lily wanted to say more, wanted to understand what had just passed between them, but the moment was broken by the sound of voices in the hallway. Mrs. Blackwood appeared in the doorway, her expression alarmed. "Mrs. Harrison." "I heard a crash." "Are you?" She stopped, taking in the scene. Victoria seated on the bench, Lily kneeling beside her, the broken pottery on the floor. "I'm perfectly fine, Mrs. Blackwood," Victoria said, her composure returning. "I dropped a plant pot, and Miss Green was kind enough to assist me. Would you please have someone clean up this mess?" "Of course, right away." Mrs. Blackwood's gaze shifted to Lily, and there was a warning in her eyes, a reminder to maintain proper boundaries. Lily stood, stepping back. I should return to my work. Yes, Victoria said, but her eyes held Lily's for a long moment. But Lily, would you mind coming to the conservatory during your lunch break sometimes? I would enjoy having someone to talk to while I work with my flowers. It was an unusual request, and they both knew it. Mrs. Blackwood's eyebrows rose almost to her hairline. But Victoria was the lady of the house, and what she wanted, she received. I'd like that, Lily said truthfully. If it's allowed. It's allowed, Victoria said firmly. I'll expect you tomorrow at noon. As Lily left the conservatory, she felt Mrs. Blackwood's disapproving stare boring into her back. She knew she was treading on dangerous ground, crossing lines that existed for good reasons. But she couldn't deny the connection she'd felt with Victoria, the sense that this woman understood something about loneliness and loss that few others could. She couldn't know, that Victoria had gone back to her sitting room as soon as Lily left and pulled out that precious photograph again. That she'd stared at it with shaking hands, comparing the baby's face to the young woman's features she'd just studied so carefully. The age was right. 23. The timing was right, found as an infant after a storm. And there was something about Lily's face, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her mouth, that echoed the woman Victoria saw in her own mirror. But it was impossible. The nurse had been taking Lily to a family hundreds of miles away. There had been no storm, no accident, no reason to think. Unless there had been. Victoria's hands trembled as she realized she needed to know the truth. After 23 years of wondering, of grieving, of living with the ghost of her lost daughter, she needed to know if this remarkable young woman, this Lily, could possibly be the child she'd given away. While Victoria was beginning to hope, Charlotte was becoming increasingly irritated by Lily's presence in the mansion. Over the next several days, she found new ways to make Lily's life difficult. She would schedule her wedding planning sessions in whatever room Lily was cleaning, forcing Lily to work around her and her entourage. She made pointed comments about the help within Lily's hearing. She complained to Mrs. Blackwood that Lily's cleaning wasn't up to standard, though everyone knew this wasn't true. That girl is too familiar, Charlotte told Alexander one evening as they reviewed wedding seating charts in the library. I've seen her having cozy little chats with your aunt in the conservatory. It's inappropriate. She's staff, not family. Alexander barely looked up from the seating chart. If Aunt Victoria wants to talk to her, what's the harm? The harm is that people need to know their place, Charlotte snapped. Your aunt is too kind for her own good. That girl will take advantage, mark my words. She probably thinks she can leverage this connection somehow, worm her way into a better position. Charlotte, you're being paranoid, Alexander said wearily. He was tired of Charlotte's constant judgments about people she considered beneath her. It was one of the things about her that bothered him, though he'd never said so directly. I'm being realistic, Charlotte insisted. You don't understand what people like that are capable of. They're always looking for an angle, a way to get ahead. Your uncle built his empire by being hard with people who tried to take advantage. You should learn from him. Alexander set down his pen and finally looked at his fiancée. What exactly do you want me to do about a cleaning woman? I want her gone, Charlotte said flatly. Tell Mrs. Blackwood to send someone else to finish the job. Someone who understands boundaries. Charlotte. Alexander, please. Charlotte softened her tone, moving closer to him. This is our wedding. I want everything to be perfect. I can't focus with that girl constantly underfoot, making me uncomfortable in what's about to become my home. Alexander sighed. He could fight this battle, or he could concede and avoid an argument. He'd learned that with Charlotte, picking his battles was essential. And in the grand scheme of things, what did it matter which cleaning person worked in the house? Fine, he said. I'll speak to Mrs. Blackwood tomorrow. Charlotte smiled triumphantly and kissed his cheek. Thank you, darling. You won't regret this. But Alexander already did regret it, even before the conversation ended. There was something distasteful about dismissing someone from their job simply because Charlotte found their presence inconvenient. It went against the basic sense of fairness his father had tried to instill in him before his death. Still, he'd made his choice, and he would follow through. That was what being part of the Harrison family meant, making the hard decisions, even when they felt wrong. While Charlotte was scheming to have Lily removed from the mansion, Victoria was conducting a quiet investigation of her own. She called the hospital where she'd given birth 23 years ago and, through a combination of careful lying and her considerable social influence, managed to get in touch with someone in records. She explained that she was trying to locate a former nurse. She provided the woman's name, for a charitable foundation she was establishing in honor of healthcare workers. The records clerk was sympathetic and helpful. After some digging, she delivered news that made Victoria's blood run cold. "I'm sorry to tell you this, Mrs. Harrison, but the nurse you're asking about, Helen Matthews, she died in a car accident 23 years ago. Her car went off a bridge during that terrible November storm, if you remember it. They found her body in the river the next day. It was quite tragic. She was only 45 and had just started working with a private adoption agency." Victoria's hand tightened around the phone. An adoption agency. Yes, The record shows she'd recently left the hospital to work with families privately, arranging confidential adoptions. The agency she worked for shut down after her death. There were some legal complications, from what I understand. "I see," Victoria managed to say. "Thank you for your help." After she hung up, Victoria sat in stunned silence. The nurse had died in the storm, which meant whatever happened to her baby after that night was a mystery. The carefully arranged adoption would never have taken place. Her daughter could have ended up anywhere, in state care, with another family, or... Victoria's heart raced. Or she could have been found by someone. Someone who took her in and raised her. Someone like Martha Green. She needed to know more about Lily. She needed to see if there was any way to confirm her suspicions without revealing her own secrets. If she was wrong, if this was all just a painful coincidence, she couldn't bear to raise hopes, her own or this young woman's. Victoria made a decision. She would ask Lily about her past, carefully, gently, and look for any evidence that might confirm or deny what her heart was beginning to believe. Lily began taking her lunch breaks in the conservatory, as Victoria had requested. At first, she was nervous, unsure how to act around the lady of the house. But Victoria had a gift for putting her at ease. They talked about flowers initially. Victoria taught Lily about orchids, explaining their complex care requirements, their delicate beauty. Lily shared stories about the wildflowers she'd loved as a child, the ones Martha had shown her growing along the river. But their conversations gradually deepened, touching on loss, loneliness, and the unexpected ways life shaped people. On the fourth day, Victoria gently asked Lily about the locket she wore. "It's beautiful," Victoria said, her voice carefully casual. "Is it a family heirloom?" Lily's hand went to the locket instinctively. "In a way. Martha, my adoptive mother, she said it was with me when she found me. It's the only thing I have from my birth family." "May I see it?" Victoria asked, and Lily heard a tremor in her voice. Lily unclasped the locket and handed it to Victoria, watching as the older woman's hands began to shake. Victoria opened it, staring at the photograph inside, a young woman's face, smiling at the camera with hope in her eyes. The locket slipped from Victoria's fingers and clattered to the floor. "Mrs. Harrison." Lily bent to retrieve it, concerned by the older woman's sudden pallor. That's me," Victoria whispered, her voice breaking. "That photograph. It's me. From when I was 19 years old." Time seemed to stop. Lily stared at Victoria, then at the photograph in the locket, then back again. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same eyes, the same delicate features, just younger, unlined by time and sorrow. "I don't understand," Lily said, her own voice shaking now. "How could you be in my locket?" Victoria looked up at Lily, tears streaming down her face, and for a moment she couldn't speak. Then, in a voice raw with 23 years of suppressed grief, she said, "Because I'm your mother. I'm your birth mother, Lily. I gave you away the night you were born, and I have mourned you every single day since." The conservatory seemed to spin around Lily. She gripped the edge of the bench, trying to process Victoria's words. "That's impossible," she whispered. "The nurse, Martha, found me by a river. You can't be." But even as she spoke, Lily knew it was true. She could feel it in her bones, in the inexplicable connection she'd felt to this woman from the first moment she'd helped her. All those lunch hours when conversation had flowed so easily, when she'd felt understood in a way she'd never experienced before, it made sense now. Victoria reached out tentatively, her hand hovering near Lily's face but not quite touching, as if afraid Lily would disappear. "I gave you to a nurse named Helen Matthews. I asked her to find you a good family, to give you the life I couldn't provide. I didn't know she died that night in a storm. I didn't know you ended up with Martha. But I prayed every day that wherever you were loved. And it seems—" Her voice broke. "It seems my prayers were answered." "Why?" Lily asked, and the word came out harsh, accusing. "Why did you give me away?" Victoria flinched but held Lily's gaze. "Because your father, Richard, he would have destroyed you. He didn't want children. When he found out I was pregnant, he threatened terrible things. I thought I was saving you. I thought I was giving you a chance at happiness." "So you chose him over me," Lily said bitterly. All the years of wondering, of feeling unwanted, of carrying that hollow place inside her where a family should have been, it all came rushing back with painful intensity. "No," Victoria said urgently. "I chose you. I chose your life, your safety, over my own happiness. Every day for 23 years, I've lived with the grief of losing you. I've hated myself for my cowardice, for not being strong enough to fight him. But I've never stopped loving you. Not for one moment." Lily stood abruptly, backing away. I need time to think about this." "Of course," Victoria said, though the pain in her eyes was palpable. "But Lily, please, don't tell anyone yet. Richard can't know. He would—" "What? Destroy me?" Lily laughed bitterly. "I've been on my own since I was 17. I've survived poverty, homelessness, and people treating me like I'm invisible. I don't need protection from your husband." "You don't understand what he's capable of," Victoria pleaded. "Please, just give me time to figure out how to handle this. We need proof, anyway, DNA tests, documentation. And we need to decide how to move forward in a way that keeps you safe." Lily wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the injustice of being hidden away again. But she could see the genuine fear in Victoria's eyes, and despite her anger, she couldn't ignore it. "Fine," she said. "But I need space right now. I can't process this." She left the conservatory without looking back, her mind reeling. Mrs. Blackwood found her in a hallway 10 minutes later, staring blankly at a painting, tears streaming down her face. "Miss Green, are you unwell?" the housekeeper asked, her stern demeanor softening slightly. I need to go home," Lily managed to say. "Please tell Mrs. Harrison I'm sorry." She gathered her things and fled the mansion, barely aware of where she was going. She ended up at the riverbank where Martha used to take her as a child, the place where Martha had found her all those years ago. Lily sat on the muddy bank, clutching the locket that now held such devastating significance, and tried to reconcile her entire understanding of herself with this new reality. She had a mother. A living mother who had spent 23 years grieving for her, who had given her away not out of cruelty but out of a desperate, misguided attempt at protection. And she had a father, a man so terrible that her mother had chosen to live without her daughter rather than subject her to his presence. The question that haunted Lily was simple and terrible. What did she do now? While Lily was grappling with the revelation that had shattered her world, Charlotte was moving forward with her plan to have Lily removed from the mansion. She found Mrs. Blackwood in her office that afternoon and, with a tone that brooked no argument, explained that the cleaning girl was no longer needed. "Miss Westbrook, I don't have the authority to dismiss someone in the middle of their contracted work," Mrs. Blackwood protested. Mrs. Harrison specifically requested. "Mrs. Harrison is too soft-hearted," Charlotte interrupted. "She doesn't understand that people like that girl take advantage. I've spoken to Alexander, and we both agree that it's better to bring in someone else to complete the work." Mrs. Blackwood's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't like Charlotte. The young woman was imperious and cruel, but she also knew her place in the household hierarchy. "I'll need to discuss this with Mrs. Harrison first." "Discuss what you like," Charlotte said dismissively. "But the girl doesn't come back tomorrow. Are we clear?" Before Mrs. Blackwood could respond, Victoria appeared in the doorway, her face pale but her voice steady. "Crystal clear, Charlotte. But I'm afraid you've overstepped your authority." Charlotte turned, surprised. "Victoria, I didn't realize you were there. I was just explaining to Mrs. Blackwood." "I heard what you were explaining," Victoria interrupted, with an edge to her voice that Charlotte had never heard before. "And I'm telling you that Lily Green's employment here is not subject to your approval. This is my home, and I decide who works in it." Charlotte's eyes narrowed. "With all due respect, this is about to become my home too. And I should have some say in." "You have no say," Victoria said flatly. "Not until you're actually married to my nephew. And perhaps not even then, if this is how you intend to treat the staff." Charlotte's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I don't understand your attachment to this girl. She's just a cleaning woman. There are dozens of others who could do the job." "She's not just anything," Victoria said, her voice rising with emotion she could barely control. "She's a human being who deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, qualities you seem to have in short supply." The two women stared at each other, the air crackling with tension. Mrs. Blackwood stood frozen, witnessing something she'd never seen before. Victoria Harrison standing up for herself, asserting her will against someone else's demands. "Alexander will hear about this," Charlotte said coldly. "Please do tell him," Victoria replied. "And while you're at it, ask yourself whether a marriage built on your need to control and demean others is really what you want." Charlotte turned and stalked out, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. After she was gone, Victoria sagged against the doorframe, the adrenaline that had fueled her confrontation draining away. "Mum," Mrs. Blackwood said gently. "Are you all right?" "No," Victoria said honestly. "But I will be. Mrs. Blackwood, please ensure that Lily Green's position here is secure, regardless of what Miss Westbrook says. And if she comes back tomorrow, if she's willing to come back, please let me know immediately." "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood paused, then added carefully, "If I may say so, it's good to see you standing up for yourself. And for that young woman." Victoria managed a wan smile. Better late than never, I suppose. That evening, Victoria sat in her private sitting room, staring at the photograph of her infant daughter and the locket that Lily had left behind in her flight from the conservatory. She held them both in her trembling hands, finally allowing herself to believe what her heart had known from the first moment she'd seen Lily. Her daughter was alive. Her daughter was here. After 23 years of grief and guilt, fate had brought them back together. But the reunion was fragile, complicated by secrets and fear and the looming presence of Richard. Victoria knew she needed to act carefully. She needed to protect Lily from Richard's wrath while also finding a way to claim her daughter publicly, to make up for all the lost years. She also needed to stop the wedding. Because if Charlotte married into the family, if she became Alexander's wife, she would make Lily's life a living hell. And Victoria would not, could not, allow that to happen. 2.5 weeks passed in a blur of tension and carefully maintained secrets. Lily had returned to the mansion the next day, though her relationship with Victoria was strained by the weight of revelation and uncertainty. They'd agreed to get DNA tests done privately, though both knew in their hearts what the results would show. Victoria had tried multiple times to convince Alexander to call off the wedding, or at least to postpone it, but she couldn't explain her real reasons without revealing Lily's identity. Alexander, caught between his aunt's unprecedented urgency and Charlotte's increasing hysteria about any delay, had sided with his fiancée. The DNA results came back 3 days before the wedding, confirming what Victoria and Lily had already known. They were mother and daughter, linked by blood and bone and 23 years of separation. Lily had wept when she saw the results. Victoria had held her, the first time she'd truly held her daughter since the night she'd given her away, and they'd cried together for all the lost time, all the missed moments, all the years of grief. "I want to tell people," Lily had said. "I want to stop hiding." After the wedding, Victoria had promised, "After Charlotte and Alexander are married and gone on their honeymoon, we'll tell Richard together. We'll face whatever comes as a family, you and me." But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The wedding day arrived with brilliant autumn sunshine. 500 guests filled the cathedral, dressed in their finest, whispering about the opulence of the occasion. The Harrison estate was transformed into a fairytale setting, with thousands of ivory roses, crystal decorations, and enough champagne to float a small boat. Charlotte was resplendent in a custom gown that had cost more than most people earned in a year. She stood in the bridal suite, surrounded by her bridesmaids, putting the final touches on her makeup. Lily, who had been hired along with the rest of the cleaning staff to help with day of preparations, was in the service areas of the church, staying well out of sight as instructed. She wore her simple black work uniform and kept her head down, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in her stomach. Victoria sat in the front pew, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, a forced smile on her face. Richard sat beside her, looking proud and powerful in his tailored tuxedo, completely unaware that his world was about to be upended. The ceremony was about to begin when disaster struck, not the kind Victoria had hoped for, but the kind that would change everything nonetheless. Charlotte, making her way toward the church sanctuary for her grand entrance, decided to check on something in the bridal preparation room. She needed to retrieve her grandmother's pearl earrings, which she'd left on the vanity. But when she entered the room, she found Lily there, collecting trash bags and tidying up after the bridal party. And Lily, in a moment of painful coincidence, was standing in front of a mirror, holding up the bouquet that Charlotte had set down, just looking at it, imagining what it might feel like to be the kind of woman who got to carry such beautiful flowers down the aisle to someone who loved her. Charlotte's fury was instant and volcanic. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "Put that down. How dare you touch my things?" Lily dropped the bouquet as if it had burned her, her face flaming. "I'm sorry, I was just..." "You were just what? Fantasizing about being something you're not." Charlotte advanced on her, her face twisted with contempt. "This is exactly what I warned everyone about. You think because Victoria has been kind to you that you're somehow special? You're not. You're just a cleaning woman who doesn't know her place." Several of Charlotte's bridesmaids appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. They gasped and giggled, phones already out to record the drama. "Please," Lily said quietly, her dignity intact despite the humiliation. "I meant no disrespect. I'll go." "Oh, you'll go all right," Charlotte snarled. "You'll go and you'll never come back. I don't want to see your face ever again. Do you understand? You're finished at the Harrison estate. I'll make sure of it." But then Charlotte made her fatal mistake. In her anger and her need to completely dominate and humiliate, she reached out and grabbed the locket that hung around Lily's neck, the locket that Lily never took off. "What's this?" Charlotte demanded, yanking it hard enough that the chain cut into Lily's neck. "Trying to dress above your station with fake jewelry." The chain snapped. The locket fell to the floor and popped open, revealing the photograph inside. Charlotte stared at it, her face going slack with shock. Then her eyes darted to Lily's face, then back to the photograph, then to the doorway where, by terrible coincidence, Victoria had appeared, drawn by the shouting. Victoria's eyes went wide with horror as she realized what had just happened. Charlotte looked from Victoria to Lily to the photograph, and Lily could see the moment understanding dawned in Charlotte's cruel eyes. "Oh my God," Charlotte breathed. "Oh my God. You're her daughter. You're Victoria's daughter." The words hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. The bridesmaids gasped and began whispering frantically. People were crowding into the hallway now, drawn by the drama, including Alexander, who had come to check on his bride. "Charlotte, please," Victoria said, her voice desperate. "This isn't the time." But Charlotte was beyond reason, beyond anything except the malicious joy of causing maximum damage. She turned to the growing crowd, her voice ringing out clear and sharp. "Everyone needs to know this," she announced. "The Harrisons have been lying to all of you. This cleaning woman, this nobody they hired, is actually Victoria Harrison's illegitimate daughter. The daughter she abandoned 23 years ago." The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs and gasps. Victoria swayed, and Lily rushed to her side, forgetting everything except the need to support her mother. Alexander stood frozen, trying to process what he was hearing. And then Richard Harrison appeared, pushing through the crowd, his face dark with rage. "What," he said in a voice that could cut glass, "is going on here?" The bridal preparation room had become ground zero for the destruction of carefully maintained secrets. Richard Harrison stood in the center of the chaos, his eyes moving from Victoria to Lily to Charlotte, his formidable intellect rapidly piecing together the truth. "Someone explain," he demanded. "Immediately." Charlotte, sensing she'd gone too far but unable to stop now, spoke first. "This woman, this cleaning woman, she's apparently Victoria's daughter. The one Victoria claimed she miscarried all those years ago." Richard's gaze locked onto Victoria, and Lily saw her mother physically shrink under the weight of it. But then something remarkable happened. Victoria straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and met her husband's eyes with a steadiness that Lily had never seen before. "Yes," Victoria said clearly. "This is Lily. She's my daughter. Our daughter, though you never wanted her and never deserved her." The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Richard's face had gone white, then red, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "You lied to me," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "For 23 years, you lied to my face." "Yes," Victoria said again. "I lied to protect her from you. I gave her away because I knew you would make her life a misery, just as you've made mine. And I've regretted it every day since. But now, by some miracle, she's here. And I will not hide her anymore. I will not be ashamed of her anymore." Lily stood beside her mother, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She looked at Richard Harrison, her father, though the word felt foreign and wrong, and saw in his eyes a coldness that made her understand, viscerally, why Victoria had been so afraid. "This is unacceptable," Richard said flatly. "You've made a mockery of this family, Victoria. And on my nephew's wedding day, no less." "Your family made a mockery of itself long ago," Victoria shot back, her voice growing stronger with each word. "With your cruelty, your control, your complete lack of human warmth. I should have left you decades ago. But I was weak and afraid. I'm not afraid anymore." Alexander, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally found his voice. "Aunt Victoria, is this true? You had a daughter." Victoria turned to her nephew, her expression softening. "Yes, Alexander. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I'm sorry this happened at your wedding. But yes, Lily is my daughter." Alexander looked at Lily, really looked at her for the first time. And Lily saw something shift in his expression, saw recognition dawn. Perhaps he saw the resemblance to Victoria, or perhaps he simply saw a young woman who had been thrust into an impossible situation through no fault of her own. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked Victoria quietly. "Because I was afraid," Victoria admitted. Afraid of Richard's reaction. Afraid of losing her again. Afraid of... She glanced at Charlotte. Of people like your fiancé making her life hell. Charlotte's face flushed with anger. Don't you dare blame this on me. You're the one who lied, who brought your bastard daughter into our lives under false pretenses. Don't you ever call her that, Victoria said, her voice like ice. And you, Charlotte, have shown your true colors today. You humiliated a young woman who had done nothing wrong except exist in your presence. You're cruel and small and utterly unworthy of my nephew. Alexander. Charlotte turned to him, expecting him to defend her. Are you going to let her speak to me this way? But Alexander was quiet, his gaze moving between Charlotte, Victoria, and Lily. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured but firm. Charlotte, I think we need to postpone the wedding. Charlotte's mouth fell open. What? This is too much, Alexander continued. Too much drama, too many revelations. I need time to process all of this, and frankly, I need time to reconsider whether... He paused, choosing his words carefully, whether we are right for each other. You're not serious, Charlotte said, her voice rising to a near shriek. Alexander Harrison, if you embarrass me like this, if you call off our wedding in front of all these people, I will make you regret it for the rest of your life. Then I'll regret it, Alexander said quietly. But I won't marry someone who treats others the way you've treated Lily today. My father taught me better than that. Charlotte stared at him in disbelief, then looked around at the crowd of witnesses, all watching avidly, phones recording every moment. The humiliation she had tried to inflict on Lily was now reflecting back on her tenfold. You'll all pay for this, she said, her voice shaking with rage and tears. Every single one of you. She fled the room, her bridesmaids scattering after her. The crowd began to disperse, whispers following in their wake. Soon, only Richard, Victoria, Alexander, and Lily remained in the room. Richard looked at his wife with an expression of pure contempt. This isn't over, Victoria. When we get home, we are going to discuss the consequences of your deception. No, Victoria said simply. We are not going home. At least, I'm not. I'm leaving you, Richard. I should have done it 23 years ago, but I'm doing it now. Richard's laugh was harsh and devoid of humor. You have nothing. No money, no resources, nowhere to go. I'll destroy you in the divorce. I don't care, Victoria said, and Lily heard the truth in her voice. I'd rather have nothing and have my daughter than have all your money and live another day in your shadow. She turned to Lily and held out her hand. Will you come with me? I know I have no right to ask, after everything. But I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the years we lost. Lily looked at her mother's outstretched hand, trembling but steady in its offer. She thought about Martha, who had taught her that family wasn't always about blood, but about love and choice. And she thought about the connection she'd felt to Victoria from that very first day, a connection that now made perfect sense. She took Victoria's hand. Yes, she said. Let's go. 1 year later. The small art gallery was filled with people admiring the paintings on the walls, vibrant, emotional pieces that captured moments of human vulnerability and strength. The artist, Lily Harrison Green, stood beside her mother, both women smiling as they watched visitors react to the work. It had been a tumultuous year. Richard had indeed tried to destroy Victoria in the divorce, but she'd had more resources than he'd known about, secret accounts, investments he hadn't tracked, and most importantly, the willingness to testify about his emotional abuse and manipulation. The divorce had been ugly and public, but Victoria had emerged free, if not wealthy. She and Lily had moved into a modest apartment together, learning how to be mother and daughter after 23 years apart. It hadn't always been easy. There were arguments and misunderstandings, old wounds that needed healing. But beneath it all was love, fierce, unconditional love that had survived decades of separation. Alexander had called off his wedding to Charlotte permanently. In the aftermath, He'd spent considerable time with Victoria and Lily, getting to know his cousin and beginning to understand the truth about his uncle's nature. He'd also taken steps to distance himself from Richard's influence in the business, eventually breaking away to start his own company. Charlotte had tried to salvage her reputation, spinning stories about being deceived by the Harrisons. But the videos of her cruelty to Lily had gone viral, and public opinion had not been kind. She'd eventually moved to another city, though gossip about her followed. As for Lily's art career, Victoria had used her connections and the last of her settlement money to help Lily secure this gallery showing. The paintings were selling well, and Lily was finally beginning to believe that she could make a living doing what she loved. "I'm so proud of you," Victoria whispered, squeezing Lily's hand. "I couldn't have done this without you," Lily replied, and meant it. "You gave me the greatest gift, not just life, but a second chance at family." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, as they often did when she reflected on how close she'd come to missing this. "Martha gave you that gift first. I'll always be grateful to her for loving you when I couldn't." They stood together, watching as a young couple debated over purchasing one of Lily's paintings, a piece titled Found, which depicted two figures embracing in a beam of light after years in darkness. "Do you think we'll ever have a normal life?" Lily asked, half joking. Victoria smiled. "Probably not. But we'll have each other, and that's more than I ever hoped for. Sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments." Charlotte's cruelty that day, as horrible as it was, it freed us both. It forced the truth into the light. "Do you ever regret not having Richard's money?" Lily asked. "Not for a second," Victoria said firmly. "I'd give up 1,000 fortunes for what we have now. Love, honesty, freedom, that's real wealth." As the evening wore on and the gallery gradually emptied, Lily and Victoria walked home together through the city streets, arm in arm. They passed by the river where Martha had found Lily all those years ago, and they stopped for a moment, both thinking of the woman who had set this entire journey in motion. "Thank you, Martha," Lily whispered into the night air. "For saving me. For loving me. For teaching me that family is what you make it." Victoria added her own silent prayer of gratitude to the woman who had done what she couldn't, raise her daughter with love and kindness. They continued walking, mother and daughter, no longer separated by secrets and fear. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but they would walk it together, building the relationship that had been stolen from them, one day at a time. And in that journey, they found something more precious than any wedding, any mansion, any billion-dollar empire. They found each other. They found home. Sometimes the cruelest moments reveal the deepest truths. Sometimes what seems like an ending is actually a beginning. And sometimes, against all odds, love finds a way back home. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more life-changing stories.